Hello, myself Nitin Patil. I am assistant professor at Department of Computer Science, Savitribai Phule University. So this particular video would be dedicated to really understand the directory structure followed by the database systems while executing the DDL statements. Now what we have to demonstrate this particular aspect, how do we using PostgreSQL? So the agenda that I'm going to follow here is I'll be basically talking in first initial part of this presentation. I will be talking about what is the structure followed by Postgres to store information about database and tables. And secondly, like what happens when we execute create database or create table commands on the disk. Okay, so I'm assuming few things here for the listeners who are listening this. So I'm assuming that rather I'm assuming that these are the prerequisites to be considered here. So basic database concept should be known. Then SQL syntax also should be known. Basic concepts related to directory and file system also should be known. And basic knowledge of handling PostgreSQL software using PSQL client is mandatory. Now here to demonstrate this particular part, I am using PostgreSQL. So in databases, generally, there is a terminology called database cluster. This database cluster is a directory on the disk where your databases are kept. Okay, all whatever is related with the database would be stored, and that is called a data area. Now, these cluster databases are generally managed by one database server. So if you have more servers installed for the same database, then for every database server, you would be having dedicated directory. Now, when you install PostgreSQL, the default data directory path for PostgreSQL database system, which can be seen in postgresql.conf file in etc directory, is /var/lib/postgresql/14/main. Now here my assumption is that PostgreSQL 14 is installed, version 14 is installed. Now after installation, what happens is I'm assuming that the binary installation is done by the user. After installation, the PostgreSQL software a default database cluster with the directory is created. And that is the data directory name, whatever the data directory name that we saw, var lib PostgreSQL 14 main. And this directory contains or this cluster contains three databases named Postgres, template 1 and template 0. Now this directory also is a place, or this cluster is also a place where your user created database also would be created. Okay, or added. Now this database cluster, as I mentioned earlier, contains three databases, standard databases, namely Postgres, template 1 and template 0. And these are specifically added there by the database system. Say, for example, Postgres database would be responsible for permitting users to create new databases. For example, like create database command. OK, now database template 1 would be a template when you create a database, you have to add objects there, like for example, schema or functions or relations or views, whatever the database objects are, those are permitted to be created through this template 1 as a template. Now there is another third database, default database added as template 0, which is only contains predefined things as that rather standard objects. Okay. Now let us try to see through the practical demonstration. I'm using a Linux operating system. As well as through Linux operating system, I would be demonstrating the PostgreSQL software over here. Okay. Now let us say, suppose I have started my PostgreSQL server. So after installation, if I write psql-l, I should be able to see those three standard databases. Okay, Postgres, template 0 and template 1. Now when we deal with these standard databases, like for example, suppose if I fire create db, say let me give some name as say Nitin. Now I fired a create db command. This is a shell script that I fired, or script that I fired from the shell. I can apply the similar command through the PSQL client. OK, so for example, if I use PSQL client, I could have written create database and suppose I am saying Nitin1. So same thing could be applied there. So if I write now PSQL-L, now one should be able to see now like the default ones were 3, then I have created 2. So one is through SQL command and one is through the script. So those 2 are added. Now, where exactly the path is for our data directory? So as I mentioned in PostgreSQL.conf file, you should get it. So let me go to that directory particularly /var/lib /PostgreSQL/14/main, and there are different directories added, okay, which are created after installation. So we have to mainly search for base. Now, if you see, I have how many entries there? Some numbers are there. One, then 107223, 107224, 13759, and 13760. And there is some file also created. If I write ls-l, then one can identify that each of them are directories. Correct. And if I count these numbers are 5. And if I write psql-l, we have seen that we have the 5 databases. Now we have to relate this. So whenever you fire any create database command, so let me again fire, say create db, say let me give you some name as temp1. So ultimately in that particular directory, if I see one more number would be added. Right now you can see that there are 6 numbers added. Right. Now how exactly we will identify that which number belongs to the database system. So let me open another terminal over here. And we have now these numbers associated. Okay, so let me go to PSQL. And let me write select that name, comma, OID. This is the identifier used by the PostgreSQL to identify the objects. So from PG underscore database. Now this was added because of your template 1. Okay, so if I fire this and Postgres database, so one can see that these numbers are associated. So if I say order by OID. Now you can see 1, then 13759, 13759, 13760, 13760. So for each database, there is an associated directory. Okay, now you may see that I have logged in with Nitin as a database system. So if I see what is the number for here, it is 107223. So if I go to CD 107223, then I should be able to see various numbers added there. It was fired. They are created because of that template 1 database. Correct. Complete template is copied there. Now, when we are talking about this whole directory structure is copied, what happens if I create my own? Right. So let us see here. So let me fire. Now, if I write /d, I don't have any relation created there. Correct. So let me fire a command called create table. Say student role integer, comma, name, varchar 10. Correct. Let me fire this. Now, as my command got executed, correct. Now, if I try to count here, say for example, ls wc-l. Now there is 296 because we already added one record. So if I fire another create table command for say student 1, correct. Now if I find now that count, I should see 297. That means what? Whenever we create an object here, an appropriate number is added there. How can I find that number? So there are catalog tables used by Postgres, okay, which store information about every object. So there is a table called pg underscore class. So if I write select OID, comma, real name from pg class, where real name like say stude. So let us write % and semicolon. So we should be able to see now these numbers. So now if I fire ls command over here, ls, okay, and let us add these numbers and try to see. Let us try to see what is added. Now one may be able to see that there are the files created with the same numbers which are seen over here by us. Okay, what are the things that we see here? Same number is added there. Say for example 226 and 229. Now these are the identifiers, the numbers added for the respective files created for the relations that are created by you. Correct. Now similarly, suppose now there would be a size allocated. So initially size is 0. So in Postgres, what happens is the database would be the objects would be having some size, default size would be 0. Whenever you insert a record, suppose if I insert a record, insert into say student values. Now I'm using data manipulation statement, but ultimately it is going to make a change in the size too. So let me add, say for example, Nitin. So if I fire this command and if when this got executed, now if I fire again this ls, I should be able to see that the file size got changed. So earlier it was 0, now it is 8192. Now what happens is whenever your DDL statements are fired, files directories are created. Right. So I have purposefully took, say for example, create table and create database command, and that those commands are actually forcing or communicating to OS, and OS is creating a structure for them, a directory structure as well as the files. Right. And this is the kind of structure that is added. So everything, whatever the objects that you create would be stored in some form like a file there. Correct. It could be encrypted. So if I try to probably see contents of this file, say for example 7226, it will not display that because this is an encrypted code, encrypted file rather. Okay, and which can be only understood or seen by the PSQL client or any client which permits you accessing Postgres database. Okay, so I assume like what are the tables that we created, what are the database that we created, their numbers are seen ultimately there. So this is the kind of structure that is followed by Postgres database system. So every other database system may have its own representations to store this information, which we may have to dig out by considering the respective database software. Thank you.